So, we're up to the general meaning, which in this case is more like the wrap-up. But it also precedes a critical examination of issues. So, this section, if I may make a joke, you know by heart by now. If when you read it, you didn't recognize it, that sometimes can happen. If we go to the second quote from Tsong-kha-pa's Great Exposition of Special Insight, own power means that whatsoever phenomenon appears as established by way of its own entity. And then notice he says it appears, and then down a few lines, and also that it is established in accordance with that appearance. It appears as non-contingent on others. That is, as non-reliant. Now, of course, we can explain non-contingent on others. Who's the commentator in brackets? Anyway, that's carried over from the earlier exposition. Is it Ngam Belden? Probably is. And also that it is established in accordance with that appearance. If you're wearing green sunglasses, everything appears as some shade of green. And maybe if you get too used to them, everything will appear as established in accordance with that appearance, right? But if you're tricked by that appearance and you understand that things aren't established that way, they won't appear to you to be established that way. However, we go around thinking that things are established in accordance with their appearance. If I take off my glasses like this, I don't think that things are established in accordance with their appearance. Now I do. I'm nearsighted. It's really good nearsight. Really good nearsight. Yes, please.
Question. Oh, okay. Is appearing in such and such a way, whatever green, truly established, and appearing to be established as such and such a way the same thing?
No, different. When I look up and see the moon, I see two moons. If I don't have at least my distance glasses on. These are my $250 computer glasses. With these, I'd probably see a double moon, but I know it's a single moon. So appear to be established means that's how it is. Now, if we're asked, oh, is it really established that way? Well, if we've been to enough science classes, and we think, given a little time to think about it, well, who knows how it's established? Who knows how it really exists? It's a whole lot of quarks. My physics is pretty old, so I'm a quark thinker, right? Some of you have heard me say before, when His Holiness met with Glenn Seaborg, the head of the Atomic Energy Commission? I forget what it was in the States. He said, His Holiness asked him, Glenn, I talk as if I know Glenn, who since probably has passed away. His Holiness asked him some questions about particles, and he said the atoms, blah blah blah, and so forth, are composed of quarks. This was after a while, and so His Holiness said, "Do quarks have parts?" And Seaborg said, "No." And then Seaborg thought for a moment, and he said, "Oh, yes, quarks have parts." You can see it's the typical question from a proponent of the middle way. Typical question. So, now, this material, outside of the quote, right, is Tan-dar-lha-ram-pa. It's not at the margin. So it's not Hopkins. The own power is to be understood, blah, blah, blah. And then hence is Tan-dar-lha-ram-pa. You can always look to the top of the page to see where the margin is. If it's just a translation without added commentary by Hopkins, then Tan-dar-lha-ram-pa would be at the margin. But this chapter has added comments by Hopkins. So you have to know where you are. So you're all super familiar with what's at the margin here. So, but now he nicely gives us an example of a yurt-house, a yurt. And Hopkins saves you, puts in his own 2 cents by suggesting that the word teepee could be substituted if you don't have the faintest idea what a yurt is. This is a pure-blood American speaking up. For somebody who never left Virginia, for instance. Dan Perdue, who wrote the famous book on introductory debate and phenomenology, before he went to India and fell in love with India, he had never left. I believe he had never been in an airplane. And I'm not sure whether he left Virginia or not. Probably went to Washington. But he loved India. Loved India. Went back several times. And Hopkins, being the literalist that he is, he's translating Dung Kim, yurt frame, yurt house, or, which is pretty redundant, but yurt. What came to my mind that I think didn't stimulate anybody when I brought it up before, quite like putting up, does he say 4 poles? How many poles did he? 3 long poles. Quite like this would be nowadays if you prefabbed, I brought this up before, if you prefabbed 6 rooms and a crane came along, it didn't happen to come along, and if we hired a crane, you know, they brought the 6 rooms, a flatbed came and then a crane came and it lifted the 6 rooms into place, and then we posited, hey, that's my house. You know, actually visualize it. That's my house. I did this one day. I'm speaking from a meditation. That meant something to me, and that's why I passed it along. 6 or 8 of these rooms. And the crane arranges them. These things that are, you know, on a big flatbed or maybe 2 flatbeds that are not your house, right? And it arranges them. This is a yurt house, or this, he doesn't say my yurt house, but let's say you bought these rooms. You wouldn't think of them as, well, I mean, you might, but let's pretend you don't think of them as this is my house, because they wouldn't be in the shape you expected. And of course, let's pretend in this instance, and this was the instance of my meditation, and I'll tell you another meditation. I shrunk. My family's, the house I grew up with, that wasn't left, in a sense, until my mother died. I left it at age 16, in a sense, when I went to prep school. But, you know, it was still, this is our house. And I still have that sense. So I shrunk it down to that much. I shrunk it. I kept myself my regular size. I shrunk it down. It's another one. But let's do the bringing the rooms in. You arrange it. But do a new house. And then, that's my house. This is my yurt. And since prior to being imputed this way by conceptuality, my yurt does not exist in the individual poles. They're lying on the ground. This is its meaning of not being established from the side of the object itself. There's, you got these, you got the flatbed, a couple of flatbeds, and this is my cute house. When it gets arranged, I can go around inside it, and, set up my office, do my translating, and there's a place where I can meditate. Wow. To sit on the cushion that I bought in Phuket in the forest, not Phuket on the beach. It's far from the and we didn't go to the beach every day. This is Alan Wallace's place, set up and owned by some rich guy. This cushion. Actually, I thought that if I bought one of their cushions, they might give it to me. Which they didn't. Alan wasn't there. This is where I did that retreat, which they thought would be on, what is it? I don't know. But did it solely on just as I want happiness and don't want suffering, so everybody else wants happiness, doesn't want suffering. Just on that. This is the meaning of it's not being established from the side of the object itself. Until you get it up, it's not there. It also does not exist able to set it off because an awareness of a yurt is canceled when the poles are separated out individually. Take it down, take it somewhere else. But the house I grew up in, we never lived in another house. I knew where every light switch in the house is. The Autonomists assert that at this time, there must exist a yurt-house right with the object. Right with the object. What does that mean? Right with all this stuff. For they have the qualm that if it didn't, a yurt would not be found when you search for it, when you analytically search for it. And then, when the object imputed is sought, there'd be no way to posit it. There'd be no way to put it as existing. According to them, when the object imputed is sought, nothing else I added in the word else as a choice. Nothing else is suitable. Then that the yurt-house is found as something, the collection, the shape, or as the individual poles. The collection of the poles, the shape of the poles. You know, once you get the shape there, then you've got the yurt. Once you get the shape, once the crane comes and lifts up the six really work? Or do you have to have 8? Once you arrange the 8, then you got, wow, it's there. My house. Man, I can do a lot of things now. I always wanted a house on this property. Now think of the abbey. You got all this property, right? And even you've cleared a lot of it. So when the fires come, they're going to jump to the forest, and then they're going to blaze like anything. But you've wisely cleared a lot of it. I think you cleared it, didn't you? And it's going to blaze. It's like my place in Virginia, but unfortunately, with Joshua Cutler came, and Betsy, Joshua, and I planted a line of trees of white pines right up to the house. So the fire is going to come right up to the house and destroy the house and all of Dan Perdue's tankas that he gave us. Because you see, the Blue Ridge is, the house looks right out on the Blue Ridge. So when that lights up, was it, wow, that's fortunately it's over there and it's going to come right up. Woof. I'll say, oh, it's too bad did I give or sell at a very low price my chainsaw. Oh yeah. Nothing else is suitable than that the yurt is found as the collection of the individual poles, or the shape of the individual, or the shape of the poles, or the individual poles. You know, this is going to come down like my body. The body, nothing else is suitable as my body than the collection of this stuff, or the shape, right? Or the individual, these one, right? These limbs, remember? Tibetan way, the head is a limb. Remember? Head's a limb, arms are limbs, the legs are limbs, and this is the trunk. And remember, in the old-fashioned Tibetan and Mongolian and Indian way, the head can be a limb because you think down here in the chest. So the head can be a limb. because an awareness of a yurt is canceled when the poles are separated out individually. Oh, sorry, that's the last paragraph. And therefore, at this juncture, sorry, I mixed up paragraphs. Or did I not? Yeah. At this juncture, the consequentialists respond, blah, blah, blah. It's not feasible. Now, when I translate teba, the Tibetan word teba, I see this as a logic term. So I translate it as logically feasible to carry that sense. You can just translate it as feasible. But, it don't make sense that the collection is the yurt-house. Because when you separate the poles out individually and put them in a pile, when those rooms are in the pile, house isn't there. The collection is there, but the house isn't there. Then the second bullet. Now you can't go through this quickly. You can read it quickly, but that doesn't accomplish it. I'm hanging on to that house in Barrington, Rhode Island. I read it quickly and then go back to the TV or get out another Kind bar so I can have some more fat, protein. Have some more protein. Look out the window. Complain about something. There's always something to complain about. Hopefully about other people makes it easier. Though it usually comes back to complain about oneself. When you complain about others enough, it doubles back on myself. Somehow, I don't know why. It's not logically feasible that even the shape of the three poles raised together is a... I don't know why he says that. I would think you'd have to put the what is it? Some hides sewn together, some yak hides sewn together on it for it to be a yurt. I don't know. I haven't dealt. Betsy's got a yurt, but that must be some sort of plastic or something, isn't it? I don't know what it is. Some kind of covering. I wouldn't call it a yurt until I had a covering on it. What are the poles going to do?
You have to use yurt frame. The poles give you the yurt frame.
Give you the yurt frame, but you see it says dung. Dung is the poles actually, and the kim is the home. Yeah, I agree with you.
That's one where you don't need to get air conditioning then.
Yeah, right. And maybe it's sufficient because you can hang stuff off of it, and maybe it doesn't rain enough. You can quickly throw up the, Okay, let's not speculate too much, but let's assume, who would put up a teepee if you didn't put up the skins, the the hides that, that's taken for granted. Let's say that. And the collection as the basis of imputation is not substantially established. That's just thrown in there. And an imputed existent that is imputed to it, that is, to the shape of the three poles raised together, is not logically feasible to be a substantially established yurt-house. Yurt frame? That's not just yurt frame. Kim. Kim doesn't mean frame. Now, I almost think we should stop here, nevertheless, because we're up to a difficult part. I'll point out, the consequentialists assert that although a snake does not exist in a mottled rope, mottled means speckled. Speckled may be easier to, different colors. Different colors. Of course, there are black snakes. But here, the word definitely refers to a multicolored snake, and thus requiring a multicolored rope. And the word for in Tibetan is Tengdu. Stengdu. And then down a few lines. And similarly, although all phenomena do not exist within, and the word within the object, what I'm translating there is Yul Dengdu. Now it's the same Dengdu. Yul, of course, is YUL. Within the object. Dengdu means on. It's a hard word to translate. Does not exist on a mottled rope. So up above you can see why I translated it in a mottled rope. I never came up with the absolute best, with a really good translation. I never have. I don't think I ever will. So in the second time that Dengdu came up, I translated it within. First time was in, second time within. Then at the end of the next what do you call these dots? The next dotted paragraph. At the very end, from within its aggregates. That word is, I'm satisfied with the translation. It's sepne. From within. From within. Sep is GSEB. Sepne. NAS. Sepne. From within. That's a literal translation. You might think it would be maybe the same as the within near the end of the previous paragraph. Sepne is literal, and I will stand by that translation. But at the end of the previous, well, those two exist in and exist within are both exist on the object in Tibetan. And it doesn't give anybody any problem in Tibetan because, well, I don't know. People are just used to it. But on doesn't make any, on really means on the table. You got the table and it's on it. Which doesn't make that much sense. One point I wanted to bring up, which I used to fill my obligation, since I have this contract to meet for an hour, and is, as since you read ahead, and we talked last time about whatever is a dependent arising does not inherently exist. And if I said it a different way last time, correct me or point out. We started saying it a different way, but I think we settled on whatever is a dependent arising does not inherently exist. And this cup, for instance, or my body, or this yurt is a dependent arising. Usually we put the second one first. This is a dependent arising. Whatever is a dependent arising does not inherently exist. This is often we speak about it in that order, but there are these two things, two important points. And when Tan-dar-lha-ram-pa lays out the progression of a proof statement, and when Genden Lotre taught me in his professorial office in his department in Hamburg, he laid out this very complex progression of the proof statement. And it's very complex. But we generally have, the establishing of this is a dependent arising, and whatever. Generally, when we talk about it, this is a dependent arising, and whatever is a dependent arising is necessarily empty of inherent existence. The proof statement, when you get into the technicalities of it, it puts the second one first. Whatever is, which one are you going to put first? Now, often we talk about number one being first, but then we have another context and we put number two first, number one second, and then the Lha-ram-pa talks about in a way in which when working with a consequence in this special setup, you already know whatever is a dependent arising doesn't inherently exist. And of a special psychological situation where through a consequence you're putting it together that this body is a dependent arising, and that triggers an understanding. What I'm trying to point out is we got these two, I'll call them, no, not I'll call them, two understandings. And we don't need to think about them as the one necessarily coming before the other, except in certain situations, in certain types of teachings. Whatever is a dependent arising necessarily does not inherently exist. Tsong-kha-pa talks about those who think that whatever is dependent arising must inherently exist. Why? Because it's got to exist. You got to be able to find it. It's got to have some substance. What I'm pointing out is they get talked about and moved about this way. What's important is to know there are these two elements and to be open to the one being, they're being moved around, and not to be confused by their being moved around. I'm right now confused. I don't remember. Gendon Lotra was a fantastic scholar. In his highly complex layout of the proof statement, did it because he's got a consequence in the process of, first you're breaking down the pointedness of the opponent's, the pointedness, it's spelled two different ways. The pointedness of the opponent's wrong view, or the vibrancy of the opponent's wrong view. Vibrancy means this is my view. You bet your ass the opponent has a strong view. So that's the vibrancy of it, or the pointedness of it. That there was these two different ways of spelling pointedness. Ze, point, you see, breaking down the point. And you can see where somebody, and when you break down the pointedness of someone's view, I've been a Republican all my life. I've been a Democrat all my life. I've been a Republican all my life. And the person generally is, it's like not anyone knocked back. I always smoke a cigar during a department meeting. And when I spoke up and said, well, I don't want cigar smoke all over my jacket. I don't want to have to get it cleaned after every meeting. And I really knocked people down. Knocked them down. Knocked down. You can see it. And vibrancy is tzel. The same word as the Nyingma term of the vibrancy of the basic stuff of things. Zell. And that gets, because Genren Lotre begins, and this is common to all of the schools in Buddhism, that when you debate, you begin with a consequence. This is the formal procedure. You begin with a consequence. Because he lays it out this way, in the true way that it is in all schools, guys like me get confused. Then the proof statement, which words similar material with the entailment coming first in that phase, that's where I get confused, because the consequence was first. Now, the consequence school says, for a sharp person, the consequence is enough. You don't need to do the formal proof statement, which begins with whatever is a dependent arising necessarily is not inherently existent. That comes first, after the consequence. That comes first. Second comes, there's no question about this. And second comes, for instance, my body is is a dependent arising. Like, for instance, a pot. I was trying to explain where confusion can come in because of Genren Lotre's more thorough explanation that doesn't just give the two elements, but puts the necessary consequence before those two elements. It absurdly follows that your body is not a dependent arising because of being inherently existent. Okay. Good day. I assume we're meeting next week.